can you offer any guarantee to the Americans and Afghan allies that if they remain there past the end of the month, U.S. troops will help them evacuate past the end of the month?
Ouija, our focus right now is on doing the work at hand and on the task at hand, and that is day by day getting as many American citizens.
Will U.S. troops stay until everyone is out, or will they leave?
So I'm not going to comment on hypotheticals. What I'm going to do is stay focused on the task at hand, which is getting as many people out as rapidly as possible, and we will take that day by
So
day.
you can't commit to bringing back every American.
There's a large number of...
The president's spoken to any other world leaders since Kabul fell to the Taliban?
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong person. He has not yet spoken with any other world leaders.
Said that the president had not spoken to any other world leaders yet. Why is that?
Jake also said that our focus right now has been on operational.
What happens to the billions of dollars worth of weaponry that the U.S. gave Afghanistan? Does the U.S. have a plan for that, or does it remain in the Taliban hands?
We don't have a complete picture, obviously, of where every article of defense materials has gone, but certainly a fair amount of it has fallen into the hands of the Taliban. And obviously, we don't have a sense that they are going to readily hand it over to us at the airport.
The president yesterday said that the buck stops with him. I want to get an understanding of what did he mean by, what is he taking ownership of? Not just the decision to leave Afghanistan, but is he taking responsibility for the chaos that happened during the evacuations?
He's taking responsibility for every decision the United States government took with respect to Afghanistan because, as he said, the buck stops with him. I am also taking responsibility, and so are my colleagues, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That doesn't change the fact that there are other parties here responsible as well, who have taken actions and decisions that help lead us to where we are.
That there were key intelligence assessments warning the Taliban could overwhelm the country and take the capital within weeks. Did the White House disregard that intelligence and push ahead?
I'm not actually familiar with the intelligence assessments you're describing, but I also don't want to get into specific intelligence products.
Just wondering, can you shed light on the decision to leave behind Blackhawks and other equipment, how that fits in with the contingency plan the U.S. had?
Leave behind
Blackhawks and other equipment. Why give the Taliban access to state-of-the-art equipment that they could either use to bolster their own defenses or sell off to other countries?
This is, I think, a very good example of the difficult choices a president faces and a Secretary of Defense and a Secretary of State and a National Security Advisor face in the context of the end of a 20-year war. Those Blackhawks were not given to the Taliban. They were given to the Afghan National Security Forces to be able to defend themselves.
President Biden said that there were very few national security interests for the United States in maintaining some peace in Afghanistan. Would you actually reiterate that today? Would you say that there is no interest for us having some presence on the borders of Iran, on the borders of Pakistan, on the borders of near China? Would you, or Tajikistan? Would you just say that we should just give that up?
I would say that the president does not believe that the United States should be fighting and dying in a war for the purpose of sustaining American military boots near Tajikistan or Pakistan or Iran. No, I would say that that is something that is not. What you just laid out as a national security interest, we would not agree that it is right to ask American soldiers to risk their lives.
People who are your allies or your friends. David Axelrod has called you the best press secretary in his lifetime, I think.
My mom would like that.
Okay. But he's also said that the events of the last weekend are, this is paraphrasing here, but indefensible, I think. He said you can't defend them. And he has basically said that you guys should acknowledge that it was a failure and be willing to say that the events of the last several days were a failure, even as you maybe, defend the broader question of the drawdown in Afghanistan. What do you say to David Axelrod, who is such a fan of yours?
Mutual. There are a few people I respect as much as David Axelrod in the world of politics. He's brilliant. He's also a great human being. But he would be the first to say that there is a difference between being on the outside and speaking on television and being on the inside.
Do you have confidence in his intelligence teams?
He certainly does. He works in lockstep, and he's been briefed on a regular basis.
Why didn't you have a better plan to secure the airport? How could you not anticipate crowds of people rushing the tarmac and overwhelming limited security if there was a contingency plan in place?
Well, first I'd note something that Jake Sullivan said and John Kirby said, which is, and I'll probably butcher their iteration of it, but basically the best laid plans require adjustment when you get on the ground and see what the situation on the ground is.
But the administration's left to negotiate with the Taliban, including one of the commandos who was released from Guantanamo Bay as part of the Bo Bergdahl prisoner swap when President Biden was vice president. How does he feel about that? Does he have any regrets, and how's he digesting that?
Well, first I would note that, one, I'd point you to the Department of the Intelligence Community to assess the identity of the individual. I know there's been reporting on it, but that's not my position to do from here. I would also note that in prior negotiations and commitments made during the Trump administration, there were thousands of individuals who were released.
You said that you will conduct a review of what went wrong here on the U.S.'s response. I know you said there are other additional factors like what happened on the ground in Afghanistan that led to this. Will you publicly disclose what went wrong and who misjudged the intelligence here over how quickly the Taliban could take over?
So first, I didn't describe that we were doing a, quote, what went wrong review. What I said is we'll do a hot wash. We'll look at everything that happened.
Former officials from multiple administrations, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, have said they are certain Afghanistan will become a safe haven for terrorists. I know you and the president have disputed that. What do you think those officials are getting wrong, and can you ensure that Americans are safer today because of your actions than we were several months ago?
I want to be very clear about what our position is. Our position is that we are going to have to deal with the potential threat of terrorism from Afghanistan going forward, just as we have to deal with the potential threat of terrorism in dozens of countries in multiple continents around the world.
And the execution of the last 4, 5, 6 days that has seemed to just about everybody as not, I mean, is not the way a competent administration, not the result that a competent administration, has in the end. So isn't that a false choice? And why couldn't you do both?
So first, what I would say is that we were clear-eyed going in when we made this decision that it was possible that the Taliban would end up in control of Afghanistan. We were clear-eyed about that.
Why did he leave the White House? If on Thursday he knew, why did he leave the White House on Friday?
The president worked throughout the entire weekend. I was intimately familiar with his working habits over the course of the weekend because I was on the phone with him constantly.
Your confidence in the contingency planning. And I'm wondering if, in hindsight, looking at the planning and execution, what this administration would have done differently, knowing what it knows now.
It's a good question, and it's one that we will conduct an extensive hot wash, as we say. We'll take a look at every aspect of this from top to bottom. But
So I wanted to ask.
Well, let me parse that, because you're talking about the Security Council. A member of the Security Council, China, is moving towards recognition of the Taliban already.
Well, look.
Without any guarantees of human rights or any other guarantees.
It just so happens that China, the People's Republic of China, is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So I can tell you precisely what they said when they signed on to this statement on August 16th.
But what they're doing today is moving towards recognizing the Taliban.
I am going to have to defer to officials in Beijing to speak to what they're doing. I can tell you precisely what they signed on to, precisely.
But what does that tell you about their intent?
I'm not here to divine the intent of the PRC government. I am here to point out precisely what they have signed their name onto. The PRC government signed off on.
We've seen the resolution.
Well, and it's an important. It is an important piece of paper because not only the PRC government, but other permanent and other members of the Security Council also signed onto it. But let me just make the point on the PRC and other governments. It is not only this UN Security Council statement. We have spoken, including in recent days, of a number of groupings of countries that have, over the course of months or even longer, lent their voices and their efforts to supporting an intra-Afghan dialogue, supporting a political settlement between the parties. When it comes to the PRC, they are a member of the Extended Troika. The Extended Troika, as recently as recent days, has spoken with one voice about the need for a negotiated political settlement through a process that is owned and led by the Afghan people. A forceful takeover that ignores the basic and fundamental rights of those very Afghan people would not be consistent with what we have heard from any number of countries, including the PRC.
But that's the situation on the ground. Well, let me.
On that point, you said you have an agreement with them to let civilians pass checkpoints into the airport. We've heard from multiple Afghans. My colleagues are interviewing a family right now who were stopped at checkpoints by the Taliban and prevented from getting to the airport. This is not a singular case. Furthermore, President Biden yesterday said some of the Afghans who qualified for SIV status chose not to leave. When Jen Psaki just spoke, she said there was a contingent that did not take advantage and depart. That's a different thing. And what we've heard from Afghans on the ground is they didn't depart because they couldn't get to the airport. Is it my understanding that the U.S. is still not providing any transportation either to Americans or to SIVs trying to get to the airport to depart on these flights?
I'll tell you what we are doing. We are doing everything we possibly can in a very fluid and dynamic and challenging security environment.
I understand that,
to bring to safety. To bring to safety as many people who wish to do so. There are broad categories of individuals that we're prioritizing. In the first instance, we repatriated many of our embassy staff.
Ned, that's not my question. My question is, are you providing any kind of transportation for people who need to get to the airport? Are you considering a safe zone around the airport to make it easier for people to access these flights if they qualify?
We are doing everything we can in a challenging and dynamic security environment. We are engaging with the Taliban. We've heard these assurances of safe passage. Again, their words are only worth their words. We are going to be looking for follow through.
They're not following through, is what I'm telling you.
We are watching very closely, Christina. This is a fluid situation. My colleague mentioned, we notified the first tranche of American citizens in Afghanistan yesterday who had, overnight, I should say, who had expressed an interest in being repatriated to the United States. Many of those individuals arrived at the airport. Many of them have been repatriated. U.S. military flights today.
But two of them are telling us right now they can't get to the airport and they've gone back home.
I can't speak to individual cases. What I can speak to is what we are seeking to do. We are doing everything within our power to effect a corridor of safe passage for civilians. Of course, that includes American citizens who are seeking to make their way to HYGO for repatriation, safe passage for other civilians, whether those are Afghans who have been referred for P1, for P2, for the SIV program, for our locally engaged staff at the embassy. We are going to continue to do all we can. This is a dynamic, it's a fluid security environment. If we're in a position to do more, I can guarantee you we will do as much as we can.
That's not something you can do at the moment.
At the moment, we are doing everything we can to allow civilians to be able to transit to the airport. Our message remains for American citizens and for others who have expressed interest in relocation out of Afghanistan. Shelter in place until and unless you receive a communication from the U.S. Embassy. As I said, we notified the first tranche of American citizens overnight who had expressed interest in being repatriated. In those messages, we provide specific information about precisely where they should go on the airport compound, and it tells them precisely when to go. This is, again, a challenging security environment. So unless and until individuals are instructed by the U.S. Embassy to make their way to the HYGO compound, we are asking them to remain in place.
Right, but these are people who have been instructed and they can't get there. So what is your advice to the Americans who have been notified? They have the email from you, they have the instructions, they can't get there, they went back home, they're hiding in their apartments.
We tell them in our communications that their safety needs to be their top priority. If they feel that it is unsafe for them to make their way to the airport, they should not seek to do so. We will continue to do all we can and we will continue to be in touch with them, I should say, to provide clear guidance about when and how they should make their way to the airport compound. Andrea.
Can you answer the HYGO question?